101.9 FM, Worcester's news, weather, and traffic station. So glad you tuned in. This is our special 2-hour show. I'm in the studio with wonderful people. We are talking about autism. We're talking about treatment. We're talking about awareness. We're talking about acceptance. When we were at the break, Scott and Julie and Russell and I were all speaking about different component parts of autism, of treatment, and Dr. Julie Vargas, who of course is B.F. Skinner's daughter, and she is the head of the B.F. Skinner Foundation, had indicated, and I thought this was interesting, Julie, that Massachusetts has more behavioral analysis doctoral programs than any other state. The reason why that piece of information is interesting to me, because I always say that Massachusetts is the brain center of the country, but we also know that we were the first ones to pass the Eureka law, which was basically the availability of insurance coverage for individuals that were diagnosed on the spectrum. And because of that law, and because of us really leading the way throughout the country, most states now have some form of laws that allow for, example, payment by insurance companies for applied behavior analysis. So, Julie, build off of that a little bit, because this opens the door now. It's a whole new ball of wax when we can get insurance in to, substantiate and pay for these kinds of services, understanding that this is the treatment that works.
Yes, I think it's wonderful, and it's important that when you have credentialing,
right,
that the credentialing indicates that the people who are providing the services are competent.
Right.
And that is always a problem. There are lots of cases where people say that they are doing ABA treatment, but they don't have the credentialing. We do have a credentialing agency called the Behavior Analysis Certification Board that will give some assurance that somebody has had at least training and supervised practice in working with people with special needs, or actually working with anybody using ABA principles, even working in business and industry.
Julie, when we were first researching applied behavior analysis and the different levels of certification and education that you need and the programming, we did an expansive research to find the different credentialing boards. We've actually listed them all on our website so that you can go through and you can really look up somebody to see if in fact they have been credentialed. It's no different than going to the bar to make sure that somebody is a licensed attorney before they're holding themselves out there to practice. And so that kind of information I feel is so useful, because again, if people are holding themselves out to be qualified, especially when they're working with families that they're fearful, they've gotten a diagnosis, they're overwhelmed, and they might be more inclined to trust people than maybe they should be, that can lead us down a wrong path. I want to take a turn for a minute, and I'm going to start, Julie, with you, and then we're going to take it around the table. I want to talk a little bit about behavioral outbursts in parenting, because I think there's a difference that I have been at least witnessing in my own life in terms of children that have disabilities versus children that don't. I've got a gaggle, I've got 5, so I've been fortunate enough to be able to kind of look at it from both ends. And as a parent of a typical child, you can become frustrated. You can feel helpless to a certain extent whenever a child has a meltdown. If they're crying, if they're upset, if they're thrashing about. But with a typical child, for the most part, they have the ability to communicate. They can tell you what they're feeling. But for parents of children with autism, outbursts can be significantly more severe. And oftentimes, these outbursts can be caused by the child's frustration over their inability to communicate, or it could be even maybe a result of a routine change. And so this is a 2-part question, Julie. How do you teach or educate parents and caregivers to, 1, recognize triggers or stimulus ahead of time in order to avoid a meltdown situation, and, I need to like this one, or 2, to employ operant conditioning if the outburst is already in process? So in other words, how can you affect changes in behavior by using positive reinforcement?
Well, there really are 2 answers, and that's an excellent question. I'll give you an example. I have a typically developing children, and one time when the oldest was 2 years old, she was playing with my keys, and I was late for something, and I wanted my keys back. So I asked her to give them to me, and I didn't get them. I ended up grabbing them. I hate to admit this, grabbing them away from her. She screamed bloody murder, made a big scene, and then I thought, okay, I've got to teach things that will prevent this sort of thing.
Right.
So what you do is you start teaching, handing things over. But the first thing you give them to hand back is not something they want. It's something they don't want. So
Right.
they're likely to give it back. And in fact, I actually used this in a daycare center with I was just visiting it, and they had a kid that was the son of a baseball player, and everything you gave him, he threw. And I thought, well, let's see. You know, I always, I know the science works, but
Maybe it
you
was a
always
picture.
wonder whether it's going to work right now. So I said, well, what does he not like? And it was some orange or something like that. No, not something that would be round. It would be better something else. I've
Yeah.
forgotten what it was. But anyway, within 3 minutes, I had him. When you had your open hand in front of him, he would put whatever he was holding there, including balls.
Right.
It didn't take long. So, number one, you have to anticipate the kinds of situations that might occur and teach alternative behaviors. And two, I don't really have a lot of suggestions about what to do when there is a meltdown. My inclination is, even though it seems counter to ABA principles, the first thing you naturally want to do is to try to help, hug the kid and calm them down. And I don't think that's bad.
Right.
I think it's fine. You do it once. But then you look at what was the situation leading up to it, and how can you change it so it won't happen again.
So back to the triggers. Tell me, yes, Russell.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Julie Vargas. That's, I always say, when someone's having a meltdown or a panic attack, just be there for them. You don't even have to do much talking. You just be there for them so they're not alone. Give them the hug if they're comfortable with that. Just really be there for emotional support and help them ride it out. Just listen. Even if the words they're saying don't make sense, or it scares you to hear something they might say, just listen. Let them ride it out, because the worst thing for me personally is to ride out a meltdown or a panic attack by myself. So just always, for me, I always tell people I'm close to, if you see me in a situation like that, I want you to be there. It might not look like, I'm going to distance myself from you, but I
Right.
want you to follow me. So just because I distance myself from people doesn't mean I want to be alone. I just want quiet, but I want someone there with me. So I totally agree with Dr. Julie Vargas on that.
I love the way that you put that, Russell, that you might look like you want some alone time, but you want the backup there.
Yeah.
So that's that system of support that we all want to have in place. And I think that's part of the challenge that families are feeling. Again, because of the fact that children on the spectrum range, there's such a broad and different variety of symptoms and how severe they are. So folks, we're here today on a 2-hour special show. It's been amazing already, and we've got more to come in the next 30 minutes. I still have questions ready to go for this wonderful panel of guests. Glad that you've stuck around today, but please don't go anywhere more. You're listening to News Radio 580 AM, 94.9 FM, Worcester's news, weather, and traffic station. Legalese, Attorney Allison Cohen. We'll be right back.